Elon Musk puts 277 million into the election. He's 200 billion richer this year. 200 billion richer this year. Now, we also know that just in the month after the election, Elon Musk's wealth increased by $170 billion. It should also not be a surprise to anyone that Elon Musk himself holds $20 billion in contracts with the federal government. Now, the truth is that Doge isn't really about efficiency or reform. What Donald Trump and Elon Musk are actually engineering is the single largest wealth transfer in history.
Un multimillonario que pone casi 300 millones de dólares en las elecciones. Su fortuna explota en miles de millones de dólares y al mismo tiempo los fondos de educación, fondos de salud, fondos de veteranos empiezan a temblar. ¿Casualidad o destino? Acusan a Donald Trump y a Elon Musk de usar este departamento de eficiencia gubernamental, famosísimo como DOGE, para pagar la mayor transferencia de riqueza en la historia. Sean bienvenidos a Políticamente en Desacuerdo. Hoy tenemos mucha información muy interesante. Veremos cómo los congresistas Haley Stevens y Sean Casten han presentado el proyecto Protect Taxpayer, un proyecto de ley que busca proteger a datos de los contribuyentes luego de acusar a Elon Musk de piratear datos del tesoro. Y finalmente quiero que veamos otro panorama. Veamos un poco la otra cara de la moneda. Veamos cómo un republicano muy controvertido, que es Byron Donalds, ha sido atrapado violando la ley en el Congreso. Así que los invito a que se queden hasta el final de este video porque traemos los detalles más interesantes. Bueno, mis amigos, ustedes sabían que Elon Musk fue el mayor donante en la campaña de Trump. Según un artículo del Washington Post, Elon Musk metió a la friolera de 277 millones de dólares en las elecciones. Y al mes siguiente de la elección, su riqueza aumentó 170.000 millones de dólares. Así de increíble. Pero ¿será que esto se trata de pura coincidencia? Bueno, algunos políticos no lo ven así. Según lo dicho por el congresista Robert García, en una audiencia reciente en el Congreso el día de ayer, hay un plan en marcha para hacer el mayor traspaso de riqueza de la historia. ¿Y cómo? Con enormes recortes a programas claves para financiar recortes de impuestos a los más ricos. Lo de siempre. ¿Qué incluye esto? Hablamos del Departamento de Educación, hablamos del Departamento de Trabajo, hablamos de los beneficios para veteranos, hablamos de ayuda internacional y hasta ya se viene pensando que aquí entra el Seguro Social y el Medicare. Señores, si esto se aprueba, la pregunta es, ¿quién gana y quién pierde? Veamos lo que se dijo.
From California.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I wanted to start by thanking our witnesses for being here. Thank you for hosting this hearing as well. And I wanted to start by just starting with Dr. Resch. It's a very simple question. You can see here an article from the Washington Post. Can you just quickly, so we can take one step back, just mention how much did Elon Musk donate to Republicans in the 2024 election? To Republicans in the last election.
To Republicans overall, I do not know. Well over $250 million to the Trump campaign.
Right, almost $300 million. And in fact, Mr. Musk was the single largest donor in the last cycle. I'm not sure if you knew that or not in this last election. And here's actually the article in the headline from the Washington Post. Elon Musk puts 277 million into the election. He's 200 billion richer this year. 200 billion richer this year. Now, we also know that just in the month after the election, Elon Musk's wealth increased by $170 billion. It should also not be a surprise to anyone that Elon Musk himself holds $20 billion in contracts with the federal government. Now, the truth is that Doge isn't really about efficiency or reform. What Donald Trump and Elon Musk are actually engineering is the single largest wealth transfer in history. And to pay for the enormous tax cut that's about to come to this Congress in the months ahead, they need to slash spending by trillions of dollars. In fact, Elon Musk himself has said that he wants to slash $2 trillion, $1 trillion from the actual budget. Now, in Trump's first term, we know that he already had a huge tax cut for the richest Americans and corporations. Now he wants to slash it by 1/3 more. But here's the truth. In order to actually get more funds for their tax cut program, they need to slash trillions. And where are they going to do that? Well, they've started. The Department of Education, the Department of Labor, Veterans Benefits, USAID, and eventually Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Right now, as we know, Elon Musk, the richest man on the planet, is trying to destroy USAID with his Doge team. Now, this is the agency we know that distributes foreign aid, but that's just step one of their plan. Now, of course, we know they're going after the Department of Education. And here's an article from the Washington Post as well. Trump preps order to dismantle the Department of Education as Doge probes data. Now, let me just begin by saying that their mission is to destroy federal agencies like the Department of Ed, to then save money and then transfer that wealth to Elon Musk, his companies, and their billionaire friends through a massive tax cut. Eliminating the Department of Ed would be catastrophic for children all over this country. I'm a longtime educator. I spent 10 years in the classroom teaching and as an administrator. The funding provided by the Department of Ed is critical to children with disabilities, student loans for colleges, and ensuring that students are protected across this country. The Department of Ed has $160 billion to help kids pay for college, $18 billion for low-income kids at K-12 schools, $15 billion for kids with disabilities, and in most cases, most schools are reliant on the Department of Ed to ensure that students with disabilities or that have additional needs get the education that they deserve. And now all of that is on the line because billionaires and corporations in this country need and want a larger tax cut. So let's be crystal clear about what Elon Musk is actually doing right now.
Uno de los puntos, yo creo que más alarmantes, ¿no?, es esta idea de eliminar el Departamento de Educación. Según las cifras oficiales, este departamento destina como $160,000 millones en préstamos estudiantiles, $18,000 millones a escuelas de bajos recursos, $15,000 millones a educación especial. Señores, si todo eso desaparece, hablamos de que millones de niños van a quedar sin apoyo. Y lo peor es que esto es solo el principio. Ante todo esto, el Congreso quiere que Elon Musk testifique bajo juramento. Se sospecha que hay algo grande tras bambalinas y pues quieren respuestas. ¿Responderá Elon Musk? ¿O veremos otro episodio de los multimillonarios que hacen lo que quieren? ¿Ustedes qué creen? ¿Creen que esto es parte de una estrategia para enriquecer a los más poderosos? ¿Ustedes qué creen? ¿Creen que esto es parte de una estrategia para enriquecer a los más poderosos? ¿O simplemente así es como debería de funcionar el sistema normalmente? Vayan dejándome sus comentarios, quiero saber qué es lo que opinan. Pasemos por el otro lado del Congreso. Y es que Sean Castiel acusa a Elon Musk de piratear datos del Tesoro y promueve la ley de protección de datos de los contribuyentes. Bueno, señores, estos dos congresistas, Haley Stevens y Sean Castiel, han presentado este proyecto Protect Taxpayer, proyecto de ley que, según ellos, busca proteger a los datos de los contribuyentes, ¿no? Pero, ¿por qué quieren hacerlo? Bueno, pues él asegura que la semana anterior, personas no autorizadas accedieron al sistema de pagos del Departamento del Tesoro de los Estados Unidos. Y según él, Elon Musk y su equipo de ingenieros son los responsables de esto. Amigos, esto es muy grave porque este sistema maneja como $5 trillones al año. Es decir, aquí se procesan los pagos del gobierno, ¿no? Hablamos desde sueldos hasta ayudas sociales, pasando por pagos a contratistas, fondos de inteligencia, etc. O sea, en pocas palabras, quien tenga acceso a este sistema podría manipular los pagos del país entero. Ahora, ¿qué dice el Congreso y por qué esto es tan grave? Según Casting, el entonces fiscal asistente del Tesoro, David Leak, se negó a dar acceso a Elon Musk. ¿Qué pasó después? Según su versión, fue despedido por el secretario del Tesoro, lo que pues en teoría abrió la puerta para que Elon Musk entrara. Veamos lo que dice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, Haley Stevens and I introduced the Protect Taxpayer Data Act. This is a very simple but tragically and urgently necessary bill to address the hack of the U.S. Treasury payment system by Elon Musk and his band of IT goons last week. This bill would limit the Secretary of the Treasury's ability to give access to the payment system only to people who A, have a top secret security clearance, B, have no conflicts of interest, C, are not special government employees, and D, have been federal employees for at least a year. So why is this necessary? Well, because what happened last week comprised one of the most significant breaches of privacy and threats to our national security perhaps ever. I'm not exaggerating. And this was done with the consent of Treasury Secretary Bessent. This point is important because some of my colleagues across the aisle have suggested that somehow what they're doing is just normal diligence. This is decidedly abnormal. It is so abnormal, in fact, that when David Lebrick, the Fiscal Assistant Secretary of the Treasury and former Acting Secretary of the Treasury, refused to grant access to Elon Musk, Mr. Bessent fired Mr. Lebrick so that Musk could force his way in. Now let's understand the scope of what happened. The Treasury Department manages a $5 trillion a year federal payment system. This is the way that every branch of government pays their bills. Like any accounting system, it's critical that all the bills it pays are approved, legal, and accurately recorded in our ledger. This is how we make payments on savings bonds and other debt borrowed by the United States. It's how we pay employees. It's how we pay contractors. It's how we provide foreign aid. It's how we pay tax refunds, veterans benefits, and Social Security reimbursements. It's how we distribute money to our intelligence agents and to intelligence assets who are embedded in hostile foreign governments. Take control of this system and you can quite literally destroy the United States. To put it mildly, it's a target for our adversaries. And yet last week, unvetted, unelected, and unconfirmed individuals using insecure software and hardware hacked into that system. Did they tamper with the code? Did they manipulate payment systems to prioritize payments to companies controlled by Mr. Musk? Did they inadvertently use hardware that had been infiltrated by our allies? Did they take classified information with them on the way out that could make they themselves a security liability? As we sit here right now, we don't know the answers to any of those questions. All we have is denials from the hackers. But on what basis should we trust them? Because after all, they forced their way into the system with the full consent of someone who lied to his wife, was convicted of 34 counts of fraud for lying to financial and election regulators. As the saying goes, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me every single time, shame on me. I would suggest that we should instead trust what this individual said when he was on the campaign trail, when he promised to enact revenge on his political enemies. Trump and Musk now have information that they could use to identify individual taxpayers who, I don't know, contributed to a charity that they oppose for selective retribution. If they got control of the stop payment controls, they could now block congressionally mandated payments for health care, roads, and bridges to governors or attorneys general who are currently suing to block their unconstitutional actions in the courts. With the personal information that they've hacked into, they could go after judges who have forced them to pay hundreds of millions of dollars in penalties after being convicted in jury trials of fraud, defamation, or of companies who compete with one of their many private entities.
Bueno, pues esto ya nos lleva a preguntas enormes, ¿no? ¿Se alteraron los pagos del gobierno? ¿Será que tal vez se favorecieron empresas vinculadas a Elon Musk? ¿Se expusieron datos de inteligencia? Lo peor, amigos, es que nadie tiene respuestas claras. Solo hay negociaciones de parte del gobierno y del equipo de Elon Musk. Pues bien, ¿qué se está haciendo al respecto? Para evitar que algo así pase otra vez, el Congreso está tratando de pasar esta nueva ley que pondría restricciones en el acceso a estos sistemas. Pero aquí entra otro problema. El Partido Republicano no ha apoyado la investigación. La congresista Haley Stevens dijo en su discurso que hay republicanos que saben que esto está mal, pero no quieren enfrentarse a Donald Trump ni a Elon Musk. Veamos lo que dice.
Well, thank you to my colleague, the gentleman from Illinois, for his remarks, his dedication to this chamber, to this process, to the lawmaking. We are both in our fourth term, and certainly thank you, Mr. Speaker, for obliging us the time in the grand discourse of our democracy. It has always been a delight to work with Mr. Kasten, a longtime member of the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, a dedicated member of the Financial Services Committee, and a thinker, to say the least. And when we came together last week to introduce H.R. 1101, the Taxpayer Data Protection Act, I actually don't think that that piece of legislation was on our mind until we witnessed the very troubling, concerning, and questionably legal actions of an unelected bureaucrat, billionaire, appointee going into the Bureau of Fiscal Service to get access to the wires and the information of our taxpayers to do God knows what with. And all of a sudden, the phones of members of Congress are ringing off the hook. What is going on? I couldn't take 2 steps in my beloved Oakland County in Michigan, southeast Michigan, the district of which I'm so proud to represent, without somebody asking me in deep concern what was going on. Now, I mentioned Mr. Kasten's background, which was also tied to business and certainly tied to the workings of our Congress, but I happen to be a former Treasury official, okay? I went into the Treasury Department as a political appointee in the early days, right after an oath of office was taken, in the early days of President Barack Obama's administration, because I was a part of this auto rescue team. It was actually a real crisis in this nation, what we were looking at. It was, for the kids watching back home, I don't know how old they are, and how much they would remember, but we had a great recession going on. We had double-digit unemployment. We had a financial services sector rocked. We had an insurance market that was practically crumbling. Housing, the subprime mortgages, up the wazoo. It wasn't for sale signs in front of people's homes. And then there was the question about what was going to happen to General Motors and Chrysler, because they were staring liquidation in the face. Now, this Congress, in a different session at a different time, almost in that lame duck period before President Obama took office, this Congress passed something known as the Troubled Asset Relief Program.
Amigos, todo esto está generando un enfrentamiento político brutal en el Congreso. Aquí surgen variedad de preguntas, ¿no? ¿Será que debería Elon Musk tener acceso a sistemas financieros del gobierno? Un tema que está muy lejos de terminar. Esto va a marcar un antes y un después en lo que es la relación del gobierno con grandes empresarios de tecnología. ¿Ustedes creen que Elon Musk realmente hackeó el sistema o es una persecución política? Los invito a que me dejen sus opiniones mientras pasamos al último tema del día de hoy. Señores, un republicano ha sido atrapado violando la ley en el Congreso. Y esto fue instantáneo. Si por alguna razón ustedes quisieran hacerse republicanos MAGA, que honestamente yo no entiendo por qué alguien querría, hay dos cosas que tendrían que tener. La primera es una lealtad absoluta a Donald Trump, casi como si fuese un culto. Y la segunda es una falta total de vergüenza. O sea, tienes que estar tan dispuesto a humillarte, a mentir descaradamente, ser un hipócrita sin remedio. Y justo ahora tengo el ejemplo perfecto de esto en un congresista republicano que acaba de ser expuesto en pleno Congreso. Se trata de Byron Donalds, quien no solo rompió la ley, sino que violó una ley que los propios republicanos aprobaron. Yo creo que no existe nada más hipócrita que esto. Vamos directo al momento en el cual el congresista, Jim Coburn, lo dejó prácticamente en ridículo.
And so Republicans need every single vote to pass crummy partisan bills like this one. They can't afford to have any of their members miss a vote. And Mr. Speaker, when Democrats were in charge, when I was the chairman of the Rules Committee, we actually put in place proxy voting in response to a worldwide pandemic. Anyone could cast their vote remotely if they had an excused absence. Because it's 2025 and not 1725, and we actually can use technology to vote remotely. The backlash we got from Republicans on this was insane. You know, they went out to the press and they said that proxy voting was illegal. It's unconstitutional. It's this, it's that. And guess what? They did it themselves. Speaker Johnson voted remotely 39 times. Let me repeat that. Speaker Johnson voted remotely 39 times. And he voted remotely so he could go home early. He voted remotely so he could visit school kids. He voted remotely for an entire week once. He just didn't show up. Then, despite him voting remotely dozens of times previously, when Johnson became Speaker, he ended remote voting because he said it was, quote, unconstitutional. Unconstitutional. Yet he voted remotely 39 times. So imagine my surprise, Mr. Speaker. I would, totally blew my mind this week when I see that Representative Byron Donalds somehow voted, and he wasn't even here in this building. Mr. Speaker, I have a parliamentary inquiry.
Parliamentary inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, are members allowed under the House rules to vote by proxy?
Inquiry.
Are members allowed under House rules to vote by proxy?
Rule 3, a member may not authorize another person to cast their vote, and members are also prohibited from casting a vote on behalf of another member.
So further parliamentary, Mr. Speaker, are members allowed to vote by proxy if they have a TV appearance in California that they really want to go to?
Under Clause 2 of Rule 3, a member may not authorize another person to cast their vote, and members are also prohibited from casting a vote on behalf of another member.
Right. So this is really interesting now, because last week Congressman Byron Donalds was at HBO studios in California, not on the House floor. But somehow news reports say he also voted here on the House floor at the same time.
A los republicanos les encanta hablar de fraudes electorales imaginarios, casi tanto como les encanta cometerlos en la vida real. Byron Donalds violó la ley, así de simple, para rematar una ley absurda, impulsada por los mismos republicanos. Y ahora esa misma ley se les está regresando como un boomerang, y seguro que no será la última vez. Pero bueno, aquí viene lo que es realmente hipócrita. Pero bueno, aquí realmente lo que importa es la hipocresía descarada. Es ridículo, amigos. Este tipo de cosas deberían de tener consecuencias. O sea, me encantaría por lo menos ver a Byron Donalds tratando de explicar esto con su típico discurso falso y engañoso. A ver cómo se puede justificar. Y bueno, pues, ¿qué pasó? Parece que las reglas son solo para los demás. No es nada nuevo, ¿no? Los magas siempre encuentran esta manera de hacer exactamente lo que acusan a los demás de hacer. No solo en esto. Durante las elecciones se la pasaron hablando del precio de las cosas, de la gasolina, de los huevos, de la renta. Pero ahora que tienen este poder, no tienen ni una palabra al respecto.
As Trump's barrage of executive orders and vows to grab multiple foreign countries continue to reach new lows, it is worth noting that while he's playing with his magic marker, signing meaningless orders on ending the penny and naming himself the chief curator of entertainment at the Kennedy Center in Washington and proclaiming Gulf of America Day, while also trying to rewrite history by punishing any government or law enforcement official involved in investigating his attempt to overthrow the government, there is a massive MAGA grift going on while much of America is distracted. This while the price of basically everything keeps rising. Remember, Trump mainly won on the economy, right? He won on the groceries.
I won on two things, the border and more than immigration. You know, they like to say immigration. I break it down more to the border, but I won on the border and I won on groceries. It's a very simple word, groceries. Like almost, you know, who uses the word? I started using the word, the groceries, and I won an election based on that. We're going to bring those prices way down.
I think he genuinely thinks he invented the word groceries. Okay, that was then. Yet in the weeks since his inauguration, we have seen the groceries and all the other prices increasing almost across the board. According to a data assembly index, Meal Solutions, the meal services for ready-to-eat options are up 4.4%, baking items up 2.8%, candy, gum 6.2%, grain, beans, and pasta up 2.2%. Egg prices, which we are making a point to track here on the show, are now more expensive than at any point in the last decade. It's gotten to the point where even Fox is asking him about it, and he's going to have to do better than giving total non sequiturs if and when they keep it up.
So if all goes to plan, when do you think families will be able to feel prices going down, groceries, energy, or are you kind of saying to them, hang on, inflation may get worse until it gets better?
No, I think we're going to become a rich. Look, we're not that rich right now. We owe $36 trillion. That's because we let all these nations take advantage of us. Same thing, like $200 billion with Canada. We owe 300. We have a deficit with Mexico of $350 billion. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to let that happen.
Joining me now is Ron Insana, CNBC senior analyst and CEO of iFi.ai. Ron, let me just put this chart up here. Eggs up 78.6 points. Baby formula is up. Candy, gum, meal solutions, beverages, everything is more expensive. Why?
Well, we still have a sticky inflation problem from the last many years, Joy. Now, eggs in particular, I mean, you can't blame President Biden, and quite frankly, you can't blame President Trump. We have culled 140 million chickens since the bird flu outbreak started in 2022. So this is where things get kind of sticky. In explaining inflation, some of it comes as a result of the pandemic and the working through that we had to go of the disruption of supply chains. Some has to do with the Fed being maybe overly stimulative, the government spending a lot of money. And so prices, generally speaking, are about 20% above where they were in 2019. But to date, this president has not kept his promise to lower prices in any way, shape, or form. And in fact, if he imposes tariffs, as has been discussed and now implemented, that could raise the price even further of consumer goods, anything from houses to cars to aluminum foil, now that we have tariffs on steel and aluminum that were signed into executive order today.
Señores, estos tipos no tienen esta intención de gobernar. Nunca la han tenido, nunca lo tendrán. Lo único que hacen bien es mentir, romper la ley, luego justificarlo con más mentiras. Es lo único en lo cual son consistentes. Y de nuevo, lo de Byron Donalds es uno de muchos ejemplos más de la hipocresía republicana. No es que sea sorprendente. Sigue siendo impresionante, ¿no? Al menos la forma en la cual se contradice constantemente. Bueno, pues como siempre dicen, cada acusación que hacen los republicanos no es más que una proyección de lo que ellos mismos hacen. Y bueno, aquí estamos para exponerlo todo y todos los días. Señores, hemos llegado hasta el final de este video. Si llegaron hasta este punto, les agradezco muchísimo. Les pediría que me apoyen con un like, compartir este video, suscribirse a nuestro canal Políticamente en Desacuerdo. Nos vemos en otro video. Hasta luego.